so we'll get started. Welcome back, or welcome to, if you haven't been here before, our 2025 lecture series. So today we're joined by Mary Arthur, which is very exciting because this talk is about Lady Emma Hamilton, and Mary is Emma Hamilton's fourth great-granddaughter. So this talk's going to be going into family histories, very personal family histories, so I think it's going to be a really exciting talk. So thank you so much for coming, and I will pass over to you.
Lovely, thank you. Can you all hear me through this microphone?
Yes.
Yes. I don't have to project at all. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honour to be here tonight. And although he couldn't be here, I'd like to thank my brother Raglan, who has done a great job in compiling some of these photographs, and so I've used that as the basis for my talk. Also like to thank Emma and Clara for inviting me, and Dominic, who's helped me set up everything. So I'm going to talk about Emma Hamilton, fourth great-granny to me. I'll show first my relationship with her, then her life, her rise from abject poverty to respected and loved diplomat and society sweetheart, her liaison with Nelson and her subsequent fall, and finally her daughter and her legacy. So where do I fit in? Well, here's my family. That's my son and daughter, my husband Ian, my brother Raglan, who I've just mentioned, my brother John, and Raglan's family. Here's my mother, who was the life president of the Nelson Society. I believe we've got Nelson Society people here this evening, that's lovely. Then my grandfather Raglan, the severe-looking chap who was a judge. I don't think he really was severe, he seemed as though he was very entertaining, but sadly he died before I was born. Then my great-grandmother, Elizabeth, who married my great-grandfather, a Raglan too. He was the grandson of the 5th Duke of Beaufort and Warden of Raglan Castle, which is where they lived and where I was born. Elizabeth's siblings... Sorry. It's okay. Great-great-uncle Hugh and Philip, I'll expand on later. Then my great-grandfather Horace, and his younger son William, who begat a number of cousins that I've recently become friends with, including Lily Style, who founded the Emma Hamilton Society. Then Horatia, and that's her husband Philip Ward. And then finally, obviously, Nelson and Emma. Now, we all know, oopsie days, let's go back to that. We all know the great achievement of my great-grandfather, Horatio Nelson. The Battle of Trafalgar was actually such a decisive victory with the destruction of both the French and Spanish fleet that Britain had sea supremacy, remaining unchallenged for over 100 years. The monopoly that we secured over sea trade was the foundation for Victorian prosperity and the ensuing Industrial Revolution. When people hear that I'm a Nelson descendant, they always ask the same questions usually. What's it like to have such a famous ancestor? Or better still, how did you find out? Of course, I tell them it was just happy, I was researching my family tree a while back and, suddenly found this out. An amazing coincidence that my fourth name is Horatio, because actually, right through the years, either Emma or Horatio has been in the name of everybody right back to those two. But actually, our house was full of Nelson pictures, letters, and memorabilia that had been passed down through the family as had stories of our ancestors and letters that actually informed us about these stories. So we grew up knowing all about them. As kids, we'd wave to Nelson's column when we visited London, go to the crypt in St Paul's, and we loved the Trafalgar display at Madame Tussauds. Does anyone else remember that? Oh, that was so good. Very atmospheric. But this evening, obviously, our focus is Emma. Now, if we stick to the Victorian version of events, the establishment view was she was a low-birth temptress who lured the naval hero off the straight and narrow, the extravagant, giddy girl who squandered away his inheritance, a legacy that tarnished the legend of Nelson. But let's dispel some of these myths. After all, she is my fourth great-granny. Emma, originally called Emmy or Amy, was born in 1765 in the poor mining village of Ness, near Neston in Cheshire, to Mary and Henry Lyon, the colliery blacksmith. So her dad was a blacksmith. Emmy was likely a misspelling of Amy, as Emma was known as Amy in her youth. Her father sadly died shortly after her birth. And in 2015, Burton and Neston History Society, with the 1805 Club, which is the other society that celebrates Nelson and Emma, and Neston Town Council, celebrated the 250th anniversary of Emma's birth by commissioning an anvil memorial to stand near the house in which she was born. So there it is. We've no idea really where Emma actually lived in her brief time in Nest in 1765, but it wasn't Swan Cottage, that's some claim, nor even Smith's Cottage, and will probably remain a mystery forever. Her widowed mother, Mary Lyon, took baby Amy to live with her mother, Sarah Kidd, in the village of Hawarden in Flintshire, North Wales, where Mary's father, Thomas Kidd, had worked as a collier until his death in 1761, 4 years before Amy's birth. The Kidds had likely emigrated from Lancashire, as Amy, or Emma, for all her life never shook the accent off. The extended family lived in a small thatched cottage between the chemist's and the Fox and Grapes pub. Thomas's death had left the family in dire poverty. Amy's grandmother, Sarah, worked as a carter, and her mother, Mary, took work as a seamstress, but then moved to London. Amy started work at 12 in the family home of the Hawarden physician, Dr. Thomas, and where she was a maid. She had no formal education, but managed to teach herself to read and write along the way. During this period, she nursed one of their children who was very sick. However, when the child died, she was no longer required. So that was that. Amy decided to follow her mother to the bright lights of London in the autumn of 1777 and found work as a maid for the Budds, another doctor's family, in their townhouse near Blackfriars Bridge. She shared a room with a fellow maid, famous actress-to-be Jane Powell, and they remained firm friends for the rest of their days. Amy, like many 18th century maids, was soon sacked by her mistress, Mrs. Budd, and turfed out into the streets. But she never forgot her relationship with Jane, and obviously she was quite taken with a whole acting career. But actually, she found work as a classically dressed dancer, a celestial goddess, at Dr. James Graham's Temple of Health in Westminster, London, where Dr. Graham claimed to cure the sexual problems of anyone who could afford his huge fees, using, amongst other things, ultra-modern electric shocks, which he administered in the celestial bed. Wonderful. to cure infertility. Then, at the age of 14, still a child according to present-day values, Amy secured employment as a dancer in Madame Kelly's high-class brothel in Arlington Street, Piccadilly. The brothel was actually so high profile that new employees were advertised in the Town and County magazine, which duly published a portrait of the rather pretty Miss Lyon. Employment here was actually a ticket to becoming a mistress to a rich protector.
Excuse me, did you say Arlington Street?
Yes, Piccadilly.
Where the Ritz is?
Yes, yeah. So it was very high class. I'd actually happen to think, and I probably would, that it's unlikely she was ever a prostitute, because her mother was also in London, and also to do so would have damaged her chances of becoming a mistress, which actually was her ticket to out of poverty. Then sure enough, in 1781, 26-year-old Sir Harry Featherstone Hoare, or some say Fanshawe, hired 16-year-old Amy from Madame Kelly as a mistress and moved her into his country house of Uppark on the South Downs. He gave her her own suite of rooms, a complete luxury for Amy, who'd likely never had a room of her own before. Sir Harry, an only child, loved to lavish money on serious partying. Amy learnt to ride with him, accompanying him and his guests on hunting parties. When he moved to London for the winter season, he took her with him as permanent mistress. But alas, Amy fell pregnant. When she told Sir Harry in the autumn of 1781, he disowned her. 18th century society viewed unmarried mothers harshly, and ones without money faced a grim future. Pregnant Amy was in a very tight spot, and she wrote to one of Harry's friends for pity. So Sir Charles Greville took pity and said he'd take her in with her mother on condition that she repented her wild ways, saw no one else, and learned to be a pure, meek and virtuous woman. Furthermore, sadly, Greville didn't want Emma's child around, and so she was sent to live with her grandmother, Sarah Kidd, in Harden. Amy agreed. Well, she had to, didn't she? And he installed her and her mother in a rural house in Paddington Green. That's lovely, rural in Paddington Green, isn't it? On his instruction, she changed her name to Emma Hart. Her mother, at around the same time, assumed the name of Mrs. Cadogan. There's no record of her marrying, so, she just obviously took on a new name. Greville kept Emma in social isolation, but was happy for an artist he patronised, George Romney, to use her as a sitter in return for a cut of the profits. Romney loved painting Emma, and they developed an affectionate father-daughter relationship. Honest. George Romney found his muse in Emma and painted over 60 portraits of her. Unlike stiffly behaved society ladies, she was happy to try daring poses and experiment with classically inspired draped clothing. Portraits were the social media of the day, and the wealthy classes flocked to Romney's studios to see her image. Printed line drawings of Romney's Emma portraits sold like hotcakes. As a result, Emma's face became very well known, with her portraits hanging in all the great palaces in Europe. She was like a supermodel today. Although Emma had fallen in love with Greville and tried wholeheartedly to fit his humble mould, he strongly disliked her being in the limelight and sought to pass her on as a companion to his ageing, widowed uncle, Sir William Hamilton, who was British ambassador to Naples. Charles Greville was an MP on a very meagre annuity from his father's estate. He wanted to get rid of his mistress Emma, who was preventing him from finding a wealthy match. He hoped to kill two birds with one stone by both getting shot of Emma and preventing his childless uncle remarrying and disinheriting him. So it was that she went off to Naples. William Hamilton had met and become fond of Emma on a visit to London in 1784, but was aware she was really in love with Greville and reluctant to take her on as a mistress. Isn't it wonderful how they just sort of, you know, I don't know. Greville eventually persuaded him to take her for a trial period. And, lying to Emma he was treating her to a holiday, packed her and her mother off to Naples in the spring of 1786 on her 21st birthday. Sir William Hamilton, aware that Emma loved Greville, treated her respectfully as an honoured guest, giving her 4 rooms in his main residence, as well as a coach and horses. As British ambassador, Sir William moved in top circles and kept her social calendar full. Her life was now vastly richer than in Greville's deliberately cut-off Paddington Green house. 18th century Naples was Europe's 3rd largest city, and with its view of erupting Mount Vesuvius, it was an exciting and cosmopolitan place to be. But she missed Greville desperately, sent him many letters, to which he only answered one. Greville wrote to Emma in August, brutally telling her that he wanted her to become Sir William's mistress. Emma was both furious and heartbroken. But as the months passed, her affection for Sir William, who had demanded nothing of her, grew, and eventually their relationship became intimate. Although she had no formal education, she was intelligent, and Sir William made Emma his Pygmalion project. Now I say it that way round, but it's in fact probably the other way round. George Bernard Shaw knew of this story and wrote Pygmalion on the strength of it. So many people say. She soaked up his love of art, antiquities, natural history, and volcanology, and with the help of tutors, she quickly became fluent in both Italian and French. Her singing actually reached such a high standard that she was invited to sing for the Royal Opera House in Madrid. But, I mean, she didn't accept it because she was Sir William's wife, because she was actually offered money to do so. Pity she didn't accept it on reflection. So finally, having spent all that time with Sir William, it was in this church in 1791 that the widowed Sir William, who was 61, married the 26-year-old Emma. Unfortunately, for Sir William, this was effectively career and social suicide, and a major bone of contention with his nephew Greville. But he'd fallen under her charms, let's face it. He was impressed by her aptitude at managing his social engagements. As part of his ambassadorial duties, he was expected to entertain 50 to 60 people a night, and Emma was his keen, dutiful hostess, entertaining guests. In the spring of 1787, Sir William Hamilton gathered his most distinguished guests for a surprise performance. Emma performed a suddenly illuminated mime show of emotive poses from well-known Greco-Roman classics. She rearranged her scarf expertly to create stunningly different persona. The audience was amazed. No one had seen anything like it before, and they wanted more. Emma's attitudes, as they were called, quickly became famed across Europe, inspiring a fashion revolution. And it was against this backdrop that she became friends and confidant to Queen Maria Carolina of Naples and Sicily. The Queen was a Habsburg and de facto ruler of her husband's kingdoms. The Queen's sister was the guillotined Marie Antoinette, and so she abhorred the French and allied herself with the British and Austrians against France. The Queen's husband, Ferdinand, was the brother of King Charles of Spain, who urged the Italians to side with France. Now, Emma had to exercise a lot of influence over the Queen, which was beneficial to Great Britain and later Nelson in the struggle against Napoleon. And this is a fact that very few people know. Imagine how much we owe to her. For instance, she acted as a sort of spy and intercepted correspondence between Ferdinand and Charles, the brothers, and provided intelligence to the British. All of this was forgotten, of course. Now, she was a kind person, always wanting to give to people, especially people in need. So with her newfound wealth, she sent grain to the starving Maltese during their blockade and donated money to the island's governor from her own purse. As a result, she was awarded the Maltese Cross by the Tsar of Russia, which gave her the title of Dame. Very rarely is she known as Dame Emma Halton. Here we go. In 1793, a young Royal Naval officer, Horatio Nelson, serving aboard Agamemnon, was ordered to visit Naples to request aid from King Ferdinand against France, which was now at war with Britain. Emma and Sir William met Nelson for the first time, and having hit it off, stayed in friendly correspondence. At the time, the pin-up Emma was probably much more famous than Nelson. Then, a few years later, in 1798, when Nelson was commanding the fleet, he was refused supplies from Sicily to avoid antagonising Napoleon. Emma intervened and begged Queen Maria Carolina to release the supplies, which she duly did, helping to secure Nelson's victory at the Battle of the Nile. Then, encouraged by Sir William, she nursed Nelson back to health in Naples after the battle, and inevitably fell madly in love with him. What a story, eh? What a life. In an age of no social mobility, she rose from being an illiterate blacksmith's daughter to becoming a powerful European player. She wasn't a temptress, she was an equal who needed and loved Nelson as he needed and loved her. The nation loved the glamour and glitz of Nelson and Emma, and the pair attracted crowds wherever they appeared in public, rather as David and Victoria Beckham did. Just like the Beckhams, Emma and Horatio were also extremely generous, and this was one of the things, unfortunately, that contributed to her downfall. Out of their love, she bore Nelson a daughter called Horatia, who was christened, I'm told, by actually in the church that used to stand round the corner. For years, Nelson had longed for a child and instantly loved his baby daughter. Meanwhile, in 1803, Sir William died, whilst Nelson and Emma's romance was the scandal of the age, but people loved it. Not long before the Battle of Trafalgar, they all spent their last month together at Merton, living as a normal family, with Horatio only 4 years old, and then he departed for war. A very small amount of time they had to enjoy this family life. Sadly, also, in this too brief period, their time alone was limited. But they expected to shortly be spending the rest of their life together in familial bliss. Nelson was delighted with the life that Emma was carving out for them and how expert she was at entertaining. She fostered the dizzy social whirl expected of a great sea captain, and many of the hoi polloi, including the Prince Regent, joined them for dinner. His brothers and sisters and all the family also came to stay, which made him extremely happy too. So, I said about the letters that we have, well, there is a very famous letter that we don't possess anymore, which showed how much he cared for Horatio, his little girl, because it was written on the 19th of October, 1805. It says, "My dearest angel, I was made happy by the pleasure of receiving your letter of September the 19th, and I rejoice to hear that you are so very good a girl, and love my Lady Hamilton, who most dearly loves you. Give her a kiss for me. The combined fleets of the enemy are now reported to be coming out of Cadiz." That's a funny thing to say to a 4-year-old, isn't it? But, you know, it was obviously on his mind. "And therefore I answer your letter, my dearest Horatio, to mark to you that you are ever upmost in my mind. I shall be sure of your prayers for my safety, conquest and speedy return to dear Merton and our dearest good Lady Hamilton. Be a good girl, and mind what Miss Connor, her governess, says to you. Receive, my dearest Horatio, the affectionate parental blessing of your father, Nelson and Bronte." And this is one of the first pieces of evidence we have that actually, yes, he was Dad. So, upon the news of Nelson's death, Emma apparently screamed and collapsed. She was grief-stricken. She apparently slept with his battle-bloodied uniform for a whole year, as observed by a visiting sea captain. Well, of course, the Victorian account was that she drank, gambled, and spent lavishly. The income from Sir William's estate should have seen her through comfortably to her death. We all know about her descent into oblivion. She couldn't pay her debts. She was sent to prison, accompanied by Horatio. Everyone turned their back on her and she turned to drink. Later, she escaped further prison by fleeing to Calais, where she died in the gutter of amoebic dysentery, nursed by her 14-year-old daughter. But all is not what it seems. So what happened? What happened to all that money? We're particularly grateful to Sylvia Robinson because she researched Emma's finances. So she painstakingly picked through them all to understand exactly what did happen. Because Emma was not a fool. Sylvia even went through Emma's bank account at Coots to help figure things out. And my mum was requested permission from Coots to give access to Sylvia to this information because Mum was the nearest living relative. Here we go. Nelson bought Merton as a house for Emma and Horatio, although it required extensive renovation. It became an open house, as I've said, for Nelson's family. Nelson's niece Charlotte lived with Emma for 3 years, and this was the daughter of William, the brother who then denied Emma any money. Emma got on well with Nelson's siblings, who found his first wife, Fanny, rather cold. and they were all delighted that Emma made their brother so happy. So when Nelson died, and Emma was at the height of her grief, Nelson's own financial arrangements didn't make life easy. His instructions were laid out in a will with 7 codicils. In theory, she should have got the use of Merton until her death and a lump sum of £2,000, an income of £500 a year from the Bronte estate, and £4,000 for Horatia's upbringing and education. This, coupled with the £800 a year from Sir William, should have meant she was well off in those days. However, according to Sylvia, the money never came. The lump sum of £2,000 didn't arrive for over a year and was quickly subsumed by the Merton renovation debts. The Bronte estate income didn't materialise either. Even Nelson acknowledged that that was going to be an unlikely and unreliable income. The Hamilton income was erratic because his estate was shortchanged by the Foreign Secretary, who delayed paying William's pension and left him with £8,000 of debts when they evacuated the Neapolitan royal family to Palermo. So, Sir William had paid for all of that out of his own funds, leaving Emma with little to live off and with swiftly rising debts. Furthermore, Merton proved to be much more expensive to run than they'd anticipated. Horatia, though, did acknowledge in later life that Emma had retained her £4,000 strictly for her education. So with all this poverty, there was that £4,000, which today would be a considerable sum, and it always went on Horatia's education, even with the hardship that Emma was going through. And so it was that the shot that killed Horatio Nelson would also lead to Emma's despair and downfall. She beseeched politicians and her contacts in the aristocracy to supervise her rightful inheritance, but with little success. And unfortunately, the final blow came in April 1814, when a friend who she trusted and who was supposedly doing research into Nelson's life discovered some of the letters from Nelson to her and published them. Now, these were lovers' letters. In these, Nelson expressed his frustration at being separated from Emma. He expressed his frustration with the Admiralty. He even expressed his jealousy of the Prince Regent, who was spending a lot of time with Emma. They were private and should never have been seen by anyone but his love. Unfortunately, society read them avidly. They were published in a book, and society turned its back on Emma. There was no hope now of her receiving the money, especially with the Prince Regent upset. She really was abandoned. I think Nelson must have been acutely aware of the precarious nature of Emma's future income. And so on the morning of the Battle of Trafalgar, he drafted his 8th codicil, which many people know about, where he appealed to the king and country to provide for Emma, pointing out her list of Italian achievements and the unpaid support that she'd given Sir William and the embassy for 12 years without any remuneration or pension. Had William Pitt, the Prime Minister and admirer of Nelson, not died prematurely in January 1806, there was a good chance she might have actually had this bequest honoured. However, it was ignored by Lord Grenville, his successor, who was the same miserable man that had delayed William Hamilton's pension and refused any widow's pension for Emma when he was Foreign Secretary. Talk about enemies in high places. I wonder how this would have unnerved Nelson's performance at Trafalgar if he'd been aware of the shabby treatment to come. With 112,000 French soldiers in Boulogne waiting for a suitable channel crossing, we might all now be speaking French if Nelson had failed in his duty. During her descent into increasing debt, Nelson's sisters continued to invite her and Horatio to stay, but many of these invitations were ignored and turned down. Not really sure why, but it is possible that she was embarrassed. You know, having fallen from such a height, she was embarrassed with her family about her new circumstances. She may also have been afraid of losing Horatio. She'd already been compelled to give up one daughter and had lost another in childbirth. So let's have a look at some of the things that the family have. This dress is an interesting one. We've got a letter where Elizabeth Nelson Ward, who was married to Horace, writes to one of her sons, who I mentioned before, Reverend Hugh Nelson Ward, about the receipt of it from the Hamilton family, and says it was to be given to her daughter Lily, who was Elizabeth Horatio Ann. And her comment is, "I can't say I care about anything to do with Lady H descending upon poor Lily, except the love of her country and her energy, of course, as she only brought misery to us." So this is possibly the reputation of an unmarried mother that was tried to cover up by the family. And, you know, I remember stories of that era, you know, trying to hide the fact that, you know, Emma wasn't married and had Horatio. After Emma died, oh yeah, we've got lots of letters like that, so maybe if you'd like to ask me about them later, you know, I can tell a few more stories. I'm not sure I've got time. There's a great story about this dress, actually. After Emma died, the 14-year-old Horatio was brought back from Calais by Henry Cadogan, and she then lived happily with Nelson's sisters, Catherine and then Susanna. She met and married Philip Ward and went on to have 10 children of her own. So, what of Emma and Nelson's legacy? Many people are aware of Nelson's attributes as a caring officer, an astute and popular leader. And as I've already explained, Emma was an accomplished actress, singer and dancer. She was also a natural linguist and saw the benefit of education for self-improvement. And as I said, even in dire straits, she helped Horatio to learn French, Italian and German. Horatio was well-read, quick-witted. She must have been to have written that letter at age 4 to Nelson, wasn't she? Emma was also encouraged her in the cultural pursuits. So she was an accomplished musician as well, and she taught her needlework. Horatio's eldest son, Horace, my great-great-grandfather, this rather dapper-looking gentleman, went to Cambridge and then joined the clergy like his father Philip Ward, where he became rector of Radstock. And have I got time to say this? Yes. So one of the stories is also, we found in a letter, that he was desperate to actually go into the Navy. And the day that his commission arrived, the letter, apparently Horatio just was distraught. She collapsed, broke down in tears, and didn't know how he could possibly do this to her. So reluctantly he threw his commission onto the fire. His wife, Elizabeth Blandy, was the daughter of John Blandy, who started the Madeira Wine Company, which is still going today. There's another great story about Madeira, actually, so if you want to ask me about that later. The picture of Horace was a very early one by William Freeze Green. And this, sadly, and the picture of Elizabeth were both stolen from Mum's house in Wales when she first went into a care home in 2013. Yeah. So if you see them around, you know whose they are. My great-uncle Phil also became an admiral. So like his great-grandfather, he went into the Navy very young, saw active service in Egypt, and was navigation officer, eventually, on the royal yacht, HMS Orphea, where he became friends with King George and Queen Mary. In 1916, he came out of retirement to serve in the organisation of Atlantic convoys during World War I, where he remained until the end of the war. He was a champion of the Merchant Navy and was responsible for its naming, because before that it wasn't called Navy anything. It was, I can't remember what it was, but Merchant Navy was a much better name. And he died in 1937. Sadly, his wife Dorothy was killed with her sister Rachel during an air raid on Bath on the 27th of April 1942, when she was visiting her brother-in-law, Reverend Hugh Nelson Ward. So here he is, great-great-uncle Hugh. He went to Brasenose College, Oxford. Oh, that's my son there, parading in his dress uniform, which great-great-uncle Hugh used to wear at, various official occasions. Luckily, owns the same size and is himself a flamboyant musician. So I think he has worn it on gigs. He's also worn it to a friend's wedding. Actually, great-great-uncle Hugh's dress coat, evening coat, also fits Owen. So he's been able to go to a wedding in a morning suit which is very useful. So then he went into the clergy too, where he served as the rector of Wickham for many years. On his retirement, he moved to 32 Marlborough Buildings, Bath, with a huge collection of Nelson memorabilia that he had amassed through his life. Some passed through the family, and some gathered out of interest, including Nelson's death mask, which had come down from Horatio. In 1913, he presented a lot of the collection to the Greenwich Maritime Museum. Did I say 1913? 1939. Sorry. Later in the war, he moved to the circus Bath after his home became damaged in an air raid. He would also meet up regularly with Queen Mary, who spent the war at Badminton. I guess he got to know her through his brother Philip. Anyway, apparently she liked to go through his collection of Nelsonalia, and funnily enough, that nobody seems to know what happened to Nelson's death mask, but I can tell you that coincidentally there's one in Windsor. Hugh went on to the ripe old age of 90, dying peacefully in 1953 with a funeral service at Bath Abbey. My grandfather went to Queen's College, Cambridge, where he studied classics. He excelled at languages also. Some of this could sort of have some resonance. Being fluent in French and German, and obviously Latin and Greek. And at 17, he damaged his knee, which he always said saved his life from World War I. Instead, Raglan went into the Secret Intelligence Service, now MI6, where he used his language skills and code breaking. After the war, he became a barrister and then ended up as the Recorder of Gloucester. Actually, before the war, from 1929, he was aware of the perils of Hitler and would write about it regularly. And apparently my mother always said it got him into Hitler's Black Book, you know, of the agitators that were to be rounded up after the German invasion. Luckily, though, he had the last laugh as he was present at the Nuremberg trials to observe that justice was carried out correctly. My great-aunt, whose grandfather Raglan's sister, known to us simply as Auntie, was sometimes called Horatio, her family called her Nee, and she was a keen historian. She wrote 5 books, many of them about the family. So she wrote a book called The Somerset Sequence, Raglan Castle, Sorrowful Captives, Henry I, Duke of Beaufort, and Celeste, the latter being a very moving account of her daughter, seeing her here, and her life, as she sadly died of cancer aged 19. I remember my great-aunt Horatio as being a larger-than-life character, well-loved by our community in Monmouthshire and renowned for her historical knowledge and sense of humour. She was great friends with the Beauforts, who were cousins, and would often regale us with stories of her stays at Badminton. Anna Millicent Fitzroy Horatio at Somerset, my mother, trained as an actress. She was also a keen historian, although she always professed lacking in the focus to write a book. But she did speak far and wide about her famous ancestors, and you may have heard her speak actually at Nelson Society dues. And she was a loved and respected figure in the community. There are many examples of modern self-made women who nowadays are not treated so shabbily by society. To name but a few: Oprah Winfrey, Victoria Beckham, May Adams, J.K. Rowling, a single parent, shock horror. In the Georgian era, Emma could not use her charms and wit to make her own money. Who knows, if she'd been born into poverty in this day and age, I may well have been describing her rise, not her rise and fall. As you can see, I'm extremely proud of Granny, well, as well as her husband, her civil husband, Horatio, and her legacy. So thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to share her story with you.
Thank you. It was fascinating. Really good story. So time for questions anyway. It's your turn. I'm going to make sure that this is working or... Yeah. Hello? Hello? Sorry.
I've probably got time to tell you about that dress. Would you like to?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Fine.
So this dress, as I said, was handed down through the family. You know, why should Lily have the dress? You know, it could only bring. Anyway, I remember my great aunt was staying, and somehow the dress had got into our dressing up box. And in those days, very often, the bodice and the sleeves and all, the dress came in different bits, you know, to accommodate different sizes of woman. Anyway, we came clopping down, you know, to see Auntie, and we'd been playing around and acting, you know, and Auntie just looked, because of course it was her mother's dress. She, Anna, do you think it's appropriate that they're using this dress to do that? And my mum said, sorry, what do you mean? She said, well, it was Emma's. And, oh! Whereupon it got put away safely.
We do see Raglan at events, when we
Yes.
we see him every year.
My brother?
Yes.
Yeah. No, he's good. He's a good speaker. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. It's really interesting. I was just wondering, from a family history point of view, whether you've come across anything. When I was when I was doing my research, reading Winifred Goering's biography of Horatio, and she claims there that Emma never actually accepted that, Horatio rather, never accepted that Emma was her mother. She was quite happy to accept Nelson as her father.
Yes, yeah. So
Is there anything in your research in the family archives which would speak to that? Why?
yes. So what happened was, and Emma tried to hide it too, because of the shame. You know, an unmarried mother. So she was worried about Horatio being taken from her charge. And Horatio actually, sadly, as a 14-year-old teenager, became really, you know, disgusted with this woman who was supposed to be looking after her, who actually was very ill. I know she was drunk a lot, but she was also very ill with amoebic dysentery, which she probably picked up from her first early days in Naples, because Sir William had it too. Yeah, so it's absolutely true. But I think eventually, you know, once Horatio had settled down, lived to a ripe old age, she just, yeah, she knew it was that Emma was her mother and accepted it. Yeah.
The other question I had, again, from Goering's biography, Horatio, is that she claims there that Horatio had a twin sister who was smuggled off to the Foundlings Hospital.
No, yeah.
Have you any?
No, that we think is not correct. It is true, and it might have been mixed up with the fact that Emma did give birth to another of Nelson's children a few years after Horatio, and she died in childbirth. Yeah. Yeah.
What happened to the child by William?
The child by William?
Yes.
No, they didn't have a child. Emma and William didn't have a child.
He was pregnant. Who was it?
Oh, no, that was... Oh, yeah, got you. Greville. Not Greville. Harry Featherstone.
Harry, sorry, yes. Not
So, well, there are mixed views of this. We think, I mean, she stayed up with her grandmother. And there are mixed views about this. Some say Emma never really showed her much love, but then other researchers say actually Emma included her in a lot of things after Nelson had died. So I think, yeah, there's quite a sad letter because her name was Emma,
right.
saying to her mother, I'm not sure if I should come and live with you. I think I'm off now. I'm not sure she didn't emigrate, actually. Yeah. It's all quite sad, isn't it? She didn't.
We have a question here.
Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful story, and it's very special to hear it from such a personal perspective as well. I happen to be an art dealer, and I've sold lots of portraits of Emma, so I feel very fortunate in that respect. But I'm wondering, from your personal family perspective, whether you feel there's anything in particular that counts for her continuing their constant appeal in society.
Constant
appeal.
Yeah, well, what is it? Charm? I mean, it's like a supermodel, isn't it? We're all fascinated by creatures that are so well countenanced. And I think Emma had slightly more about her, you know. As I said, she was very, you know, she liked people, she was very personable, she was very generous. So society did love her, and I mean, we love a pretty person, don't we? So maybe it's that. I mean, Romney was so in love with her, it's really obvious. Never, I don't think, consummated or anything, but, you know, and in latter days he just decided to get over his obsession with her by moving back up north to his wife. But, you know, she was quite a muse, wasn't she? She was quite You know, it would be nice to have that sort of person to. I mean, what's my favourite one of her? That one? Oh, yeah, look at the features. What happened?
Yeah.
Many people say I look like him. But my daughter actually, just to, I don't know, Kate Williams saw Bex at a do once. You probably can't see her very well, but I know she's got a nose ring because she's Buddhist and she's she's quite a bohemian character. But you know, she's sort of got those features. Nelson on the Owen on the other hand is quite Lauren to himself. What do you think? What would you say was her appeal?
I don't think it's simply beauty. I mean,
No.
Rumney was obsessed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think she, perhaps unwittingly, just was able, in my opinion, to give each person what they wanted. I think she was quite mercurial, and I think she was able to adapt herself. And you see that in the portraits when Rumney paints her, she's one thing, but when Westall and Pellegrini and other people paint her, she's a very different person.
Yeah, exactly.
I think her adaptability would be something that I...
Well, she was obviously a pretty good actress, wasn't she?
Yes.
Because they were stunned by these attitudes, and just with a scarf going from one character to another. Yeah, quite. I think you're right. I think she probably was quite charismatic, wasn't she? As was Nelson. And so the two of them together. Yeah.
Dynamite.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm very struck by your description of her skills as a diplomat and her influence in the Queen of Naples to release the supplies that Nelson's navy needed before the Battle of the Nile. Is that all documented and available to...
It is, yeah. I think Kate Williams mentions it in her book, England's Mistress. Sylvia Robinson definitely in her book, which is called In Defence of Emma. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, isn't it? She was a woman, you know, so she could only talk about fluffy little kittens. So how could she possibly have helped save the nation, you know? Yeah, different age.
Any more questions?
No?
Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
It was brilliant, the personal insights into Emma. So thank you, Mary. Thank you all for coming as well. And we have a small display about Emma at the end of the corridor if you want to take a peek as well.
Yes, it's
So, yeah.
And where is it? Where is it?
It's at the end of the corridor, so just kind of opposite stuff.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you
And
very
thank
much.